And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. John Phillips Show. On this Jimmy Buffett Friday, Mr. Randy Wang's in the San Fernando Valley.
Will writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Can you imagine the chosen names of our elected officials if they got sent to Slab City? Karen Bass could be dumb as a rock. Gavin Newsom could be kicked in the head. Rob Bonta could be fork-tucked scum. And Ulysses could be... Oh, I'm not reading what he said about Ulysses. I learned my lesson, Will. I don't read on the air anything you say about Ulysses.
That's probably a good idea. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. She is a former member of the California Senate and California State Assembly. You can follow her on X at Senator Melendez, Senator Melissa Melendez. Welcome.
Hey, John. Well, thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Now, when you were in the state legislature, you represented a huge chunk of Riverside County. None of the city of Los Angeles touched your district. But because the state Senate, the state assembly, those districts are drawn based on population, the city of Los Angeles had a huge punch in the state capitol because a lot of members had a portion of the city of LA in their district. And if the city of LA asked them for something, usually the answer was yes. Well, now the city of LA is totally broke. They are $1 billion in the hole due to mismanagement. And of course, like with COVID, they're blaming everything on the fires, since they can't blame it on COVID anymore, including things like, lawsuits against the city, raises that they gave various unions, those sorts of things. So the mayor of Los Angeles, former Speaker of the California Assembly, Karen Bass, goes up to Sacramento, and she asked both houses of the state legislature for bailout money for Los Angeles. Not just for the fires, but for all of their mismanagement, for every aspect of the city budget that is not in balance. And she says they deserve it because they've had to deal with the trauma of the fires. I cannot imagine for the life of me why anyone whose district did not include the city of Los Angeles would ever agree to something like that. Your thoughts?
Oh, boy, where to begin? Well, first of all, yes, they are in the hole in a very big, big way. And it is not solely because of the fires. That is a very recent development. The fact of the matter is that Los Angeles has been wasting money for many, many, many years, so much so that they had a federal judge, as I think it was last week, who called them out on it and said, look, you guys have roughly $2 billion that you have spent just on homelessness alone that you can't account for. You can't tell us specifically where the money went or how it was spent or if it did any good. $2 billion. No accountability for those contractors that they hired. No accountability for the organizations they gave this money to. And now Karen Bass goes to Sacramento with her hand out saying, oh, but the fires, we need money. It's not our fault. Well, it is your fault. And for Karen Bass to even suggest that it didn't happen on her watch is also incorrect, because at least a year and a half of her time in office as mayor of Los Angeles is included in the audit that was done that this particular federal judge was looking at to show that they have mismanaged their money grossly. So I'm not entirely sure where she gets off going to Sacramento asking for money from, every other county in the state of California to bail them out. But I would hope that even Democrats look at this and say, particularly, let's say those who are in the Central Valley, I hope they would look at it and say, hold it right there. Our county is hurting too, and we didn't mismanage our money.
Well, when she was asked about that from KCRA's Ashley Zavala, Karen Bass's response was basically, well, we have a supermajority, so I expect to get it. But to the point that you just made, if you're a Democrat representing El Centro, or you're a Democrat representing Fresno, there's no way your city's ever going to get a bailout. You can go ahead and ask for it. You're not going to get it. Why in the world would you give it to LA when you know they wouldn't do the same for you?
Right. I mean, if you give your teenage son the keys to the car and let him, take it out and he crashes it not once, not twice, maybe 3 times, are you going to continue giving him the keys to the car? Probably not. So Los Angeles has a history of this type of abuse of financial assets that the taxpayers have given them. So why in the world would the entire state of California bail out Los Angeles, not to mention the amount of money that they're asking the federal government for from a state level? I mean, Gavin Newsom himself is looking for a handout from the federal government. And these guys, they don't know how to manage money. I put a checkbook in front of them, they would have no idea what to do with it.
What's interesting is that I have seen some pushback, which I haven't seen in a long time, from Democrats in the state legislature regarding the bullet train. Because the bullet train just came out, the high-speed rail authority came out and said they are $7 billion in the hole themselves. They need that money yesterday. And oh, by the way, they're going to be even later than what they told us before. I thought, okay, well, the Democrats in Sacramento will just go ahead with it. The unions seem to want it. And if the unions want it, they'll give it to them. But it doesn't look like that's a slam dunk. Maybe it'll happen, but they're going to have to fight tooth and nail for it. And I'm beginning to believe that it won't happen.
Now, and I would agree with you there. And frankly, I don't see that project dying until, we get a Republican in the governor's office, or at the very least, a very centrist, moderate Democrat, because that bullet train has now been essentially embedded into the California Democratic Party platform. I mean, it is just not something that they're going to turn away from, because now they're stuck. They're backed into a corner. They've supported it, all along, knowing that we don't have the money for it, knowing that it's falling behind, knowing that the costs increase year after year after year. But now they're backed into a corner having to defend it. And, I'm sorry, but Democrats will defend just about anything if it came from one of their party leaders. It doesn't matter how terrible it is. They'll defend it to the death.
Well, to that point, let's see what their limits are. Because Gavin Newsom is now a very lame duck governor. He cannot run for re-election. In 2026, the carriage turns into a pumpkin for him. And he just pissed all of them off by going on his podcast with Charlie Kirk and saying that he does not believe that biological men should compete in women's sports. Instead of giving him a pass on it, they went all over social media, members of the legislature, and attacked their own fellow Democrat, saying that he was totally out of line to make that claim. And now they want to have hearings in the state legislature on some Republican legislation that would impose a ban, and they want to use that opportunity to go after the governor for the point that he made on that podcast. If they're willing to go to war with him over that, and then he turns around and says, oh yeah, give me $7 billion more dollars for the bullet train, it makes it a little bit easier to say no again.
Right. And I think there are 2 things here that may be going on. One, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that the left is now going after him so hard, including, members of his own party within the legislature. That tells me that they don't think he's ever going to be president either, which is what we all know he's angling to do. But you're certainly not going to raise the ire of someone who you think might be your commander-in-chief someday. So that kind of tells me that they don't think he really has a shot either. Otherwise, why would they dismiss him, so quickly? The other thing is, he certainly was all for men playing in women's sports and boys playing in girls' sports up until his most recent little podcast with Charlie Kirk, where suddenly he feels a tremendous amount of sorrow and a sense of unfairness for what has been taking place. That is a dramatic shift from what he has said all along. I mean, he has been a champion for transgender rights and for the rights of boys to play in girls' sports up until, recently, within the last couple of weeks. So I'm not sure that anybody from the right or the left is buying this huge shift in his thinking on this issue. But I think it's pretty obvious to anyone with three brain cells to rub together what he's trying to do. He's trying to move to the middle.
What do you think most Democratic members of the state legislature, we know what they say publicly, but privately, many of them have kids. Many of them have kids in sports. If you were sitting at the bar at Frank Fat's having dinner with one of them and you were just talking about the subject as it impacted them and their family, what do most Democrats, given a little truth serum in the form of a martini, what do you think that they would say to you?
Well, I mean, we've talked about this, before. I mean, what they say publicly and what they say privately oftentimes are two very different things. The problem is they don't have the backbone or the spine to stand up and make those types of statements publicly, because the Democratic Party, is they really want their members to stay in line. You need to be in lockstep with their message, and you do not move outside of those lines. And they know it. And there's intimidation and threats and certainly retaliation that takes place when you don't do that. So a lot of their members, no, they don't agree with this, but they're certainly not going to stand up and be bold enough to say so, because, that requires an act of boldness. And I think the Democratic Party that I know of, at least in the past decade, settles in cowardice, not in bravery.
Well, when you're a parent, there's also something innate about fairness, particularly when it comes to sports. And you and I think, are around the same age. And when we were growing up, the issue that was the hotly debated issue was age. Because you had, I think it was the team from Taiwan that was always in the Little League World Series. And there was always a question. These guys would all have 5 o'clock shadows, and they'd all be claiming to be 12. And we'd send our actual 12-year-olds over there, and 100-mile-an-hour fastballs would be going right by them, and we'd go, "Hey, wait a minute, is that kid really 12?" And that was a subject that people took very seriously, because if you lied about your age, you had an advantage over the other kids, and that just fundamentally wasn't fair, and people went nuts over it. Everyone, regardless of political affiliation.
Right, and let's take a look at our military, for example. Okay, there are physical fitness standards that are applied to every branch of service, and it's also broken down by age, and it's also broken down by gender. Women in the military, regardless of your age, do not have to do as many push-ups as their male counterpart in order to score, a certain level on their physical readiness test, because they understand the biology and the science behind the difference between male and female as far as, physical abilities and those sorts of things. So if the military understands it, I'm not sure why California doesn't understand it. I mean, it's not discrimination. And for are there women out there who can, run as fast as a man can? Of course there are. But what we're saying is you have to recognize the physiological and physical differences between males and females. That's just fact. And for Democrats who are always wailing about, the science, you have to believe in the science, don't be a science denier. Okay, well, look at the science. I mean, it's just basic medical fact that men have largely and generally more upper body strength than a woman does. If you put two people of the same age, the same physical fitness levels, maybe the guy is probably going to be able to do more pull-ups than the woman can. It's not a negative, it's just a fact. And I don't understand why Democrats in California can't wrap their minds around that.
We're speaking with Senator Melissa Melendez, who you can follow on X at Senator Melendez. Senator, let's shift gears here and talk about the state's embattled insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara. He has made it a habit of not showing up to state legislative oversight hearings in front of the two insurance committees to be asked questions about the state of insurance here in the state of California, where we know we're experiencing a crisis right now. As it turns out, he has skipped many of these oversight committee hearings because he's been traveling around the world to places like Bermuda and South America and Hawaii and Asia and Europe and places all over the globe, staying in five-star hotels, going to conferences that are either tangentially associated with insurance or not associated with insurance at all. He didn't provide any of the proper paperwork that you're supposed to provide showing that you're there on legitimate business. The governor at one point told him to knock it off, and he continued to go on these trips after he was told to stop doing that. Now the legislature is asking him to provide the paperwork that he failed to provide the first time around, and he says he doesn't have it. What is going on in that office, and do you think he's going to survive this?
Well, does he survive it? Well, unfortunately, I've seen too many Democrats survive, much worse scandals than this, Gavin Newsom being one of them. But what's going on in his office, that's a great idea. I guess a lot of nothing, because, you have to keep records of all of this type of travel, particularly when it's taxpayer money that's used, but not just taxpayer money. If you go on a junket, which are very common in Sacramento, I never went on any junkets. I didn't believe in them, but plenty of people on both sides of the aisle did go on them. And when you go on those junkets, you have to report that when your annual campaign finance reports on a yearly basis. You have to be very detailed about how much money you received, who you received it from. If you're using campaign dollars even, or somebody else is paying for it, you have to, your meals, your drinks, your hotel, your ride share receipts, everything has to be accounted for. And you also have to state the purpose of the travel. So I don't understand, like, how can his staff say, oh, we're not really sure about what the purpose of this travel was? What do you mean? Like, why was he going? What made him accept the invitation? What did he think he was going to learn? Because I will tell you, in my entire time in the legislature, not once did anybody ever come back from a junket and say, hey, here's what I learned in, pick a place, Brazil. And I think that we could implement this here in California. Not once, never. And that's what these are supposed to be. What they say is that they're, educational and learning junkets so that you can discover new ways and new innovations to, deploy certain resources and programs in California. But I never once heard about any of it. So I know there were plenty of trips taken to Hawaii. I know I was invited to go to Cuba. I don't know what he's doing, but I think what happened was he thought, well, he was termed out of office, out of the Senate. Okay, so now where do I go so I can continue to, get these great benefits from the taxpayers? Oh, I'll run for insurance commissioner, thinking that, nobody even knows what insurance commissioner does, and nobody's going to be paying attention to me. They're going to be looking at the governor and the legislature. And then lo and behold, you get this huge insurance crisis where all these carriers are leaving, and the fires that took place in LA that, of course, he didn't know were going to happen, but it just kind of all blew up. And now, while he's been jet setting, suddenly, the spotlight's on him, and he's not entirely sure what to do about it, because he thought he was going to get in there and just go have a lot of fun. I mean, some of the trips he was taking were for pride events. What does that have to do with being the insurance commissioner?
Oh, one of them was for New York City Pride, where he attended a concert where DJ Kitty Glitter was spinning records.
Well, I'm sure that's going to help the insurance carrier situation in California. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Nobody's, who is watching what's going on? Nobody. And I think to a large extent, maybe that is, really what happened with the insurance commissioner's post anyway. Nobody really paid attention to it. I mean, I think if you polled a lot of people and said, who did you vote for insurance commissioner? Most of them would probably shrug and say, well, I don't know. Because it's just not that, to most people, it doesn't seem like that important of a position to then have to worry about. And it certainly is now, because everybody's losing their insurance. And now we have an insurance commissioner who's, in Bogota and in Paris and in Canada and everywhere else in the world except here in California in his office, trying to figure out what in the heck's going to go on and how he's going to make sure people don't lose their insurance.
Senator Melissa Melendez. You can follow her on X at Senator Melendez. Thank you so much for stopping by on this Friday. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much. Anytime, John.
It's the John Phillips Show. All right, Randy, before we get to the blotter, I want to go back to the discussion that we just had with Senator Melendez, specifically on the subject of fairness in sports. And I brought up the comparison of biological men playing in women's sports of people back in the 80s, back in the 90s, who used to lie about their age so older kids could play against younger kids in the Little League World Series. You remember that, right?
I remember you talking about it.
Okay, well, it was very common. So I went to spring training in Arizona this year to see the Angels play. And before the games would start, I would go out and play golf in the morning because the weather's beautiful in Arizona this time of year. And one of the mornings, I played golf with a major league pitcher, a major league relief pitcher, not for the Angels, not for the Dodgers, for another team. And while we were golfing, that subject came up of people lying about their age because Albert Pujols, for example, one of the reasons that he was able to get a huge contract with the Angels was that they believed that he was younger than he actually was. So the guy's walking around with a cane collecting Social Security, and he says he's 35. Okay. And he told me that it's very common, particularly for players from the Caribbean, to lie about their age. And he said there's actually a way that they do it where they have proper legal documentation while lying about their age. So he said that he figured it out after playing with enough guys from the Dominican Republic, where what they do is if a family has a bunch of kids, let's say 4 males, what they do with the males is they all give them the same name. So we got Jose Serrano number 1, Jose Serrano number 2, Jose Serrano number 3, Jose Serrano number 4. They're all brothers, same mother, same father. And what happens is, whichever one they think has a chance at the big leagues, they give the youngest birth certificate to. That's the guy that wins the birth certificate. And so he said that he would be playing with these guys who claim to be the same age as him. And these guys have white hairs in their beard, and they're clearly 5-6 years older than him. And he said he was always friendly with them when they would travel. He'd always room with them in the minor leagues and those sorts of things. And he said he was really close with one of these guys who he knew was lying about his age. And he said, come on. You got to be honest with me. There's no way you were the same age as me. And he said the answer was, no sé, papi, no sé. So anyway, that's my story about lying about your age. All right, it's time to open up the California Crime Blotter.
If the cashier is dummy.
Questions!
And Randy, this edition takes us to the clink.
Okay, this is usually a little darker tone than we do for the Crime Blotter. I usually have a rule where we don't do a lot of stories where people get murdered. But this one is so wild, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But up in Amador County, at a California state prison, 2 different women have been murdered. They were not inmates. They were visiting people, and they got murdered. What is going on?
That's not supposed to happen.
For more on this, here is a wild story from KCAL in Los Angeles.
I'm outraged. I am outraged. I am sick to my stomach.
But first, another California family asking, how could this happen after their loved one murdered inside a California state prison?
This isn't like when we told you a few weeks ago the prison guard that got held hostage by a prisoner. These were people that came to the prison to visit and somehow got killed.
Now, wait a minute. What kind of visit are we talking about here?
Oh, of the conjugal variety.
Okay. Now, you know I'm not one to blame the victim. But if your boyfriend is in state prison for doing something real bad, and you get on a Southwest Airlines airplane to go up to the prison so you can have a roll in the hay with the mister, don't be surprised if you end up like the cashier at the liquor store, too.
KCAL News assignment editor Mike Rogers, you are following up on a story you first told us about last week where a different woman was killed.
Yeah, and you know, Pat, I called the Amador County Sheriff's Office today because I wanted to get a copy of an autopsy report for Stephanie. That's the woman I told you about last week. But when I called up there, they said, well, which women are you talking about? Which
Apparently this is happening all the time.
Wow.
was a surprise to me because at this point I had only known about one woman. But tonight we've learned there's a second woman that died in the same state prison in the exact same way. I want to come up here though because I want to show you some stuff. This is Stephanie. This is the woman I told you about last week. She was strangled. Her death ruled a homicide after she was at Mule Creek State Prison in Amador County having a conjugal visit with her husband.
Wait a second. So she's doing the nasty with her prisoner husband and she got strangled to death?
Was it part of the kink play?
Well, they're ruling it murder, so I'm going to say no.
Well, it definitely sounds like he took things too far.
She was strangled. Her death ruled a homicide after she was at Mule Creek State Prison in Amador County having a conjugal visit with her husband who had been convicted of 4 murders here in Los Angeles County. So
now that's
Okay.
marriage.
There you go. 4 murders this guy has been convicted of, and she thought it was a good idea to go up there and have sex with him.
She was fulfilling her marital duties.
How desperate do you have to be to go to a prison for a conjugal visit with that guy?
Well, and here's what we don't know. We don't know if this is a marriage that was in effect pre-prison or if this is a prison pen pal turned wife. Because we know those happen a lot.
Well, I thought all the pen pals exchanged letters with the Melendez brothers.
There's a lot of prisoners that have a lot of fans, a lot of single women and men who really want to be with these people. They think they can change them.
You know, that was the prison where one of the inmates was threatening me. Do you remember that?
Oh, tell that story.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know how many details I want to put out over the air because he's still alive. But let's just say that an inmate in that particular prison was not happy with me and was sending me threatening letters through the mail and then sued me for defamation because he killed I don't know how many people and claims that he maintained his good name until I talked about him. And back then, we were owned by the Walt Disney Company, who took every single threat of a lawsuit seriously. So I got dragged into all kinds of meetings for the most ridiculous lawsuit you've ever seen before in your entire life.
Didn't know you could defame a murderer.
And then when he would send me the letters, he always used Simpson stamps.
We went back to Mule Creek State Prison. I want to show you that here because this is the prison, as I mentioned, near the Jackson area of Amador County. And they have this family visiting unit where people are allowed to spend multiple days inside the family visiting unit.
The what?
Multiple days?
They give you an apartment to stay in with your wife or your husband for a couple days.
How'd that work out for him?
With very minimal supervision. There are no cameras. There are no guards inside of this, but there are pretty nice accommodations. You've got bathrooms like this. This is at a different state prison, but generally...
Does every state prison have one of these family apartments?
I guess.
But generally, they look the same. It's called the California model within the CDCR system. They've got 2 bedrooms, a living room here, as well as a kitchen.
Who came up with this idea?
Someone who has very poor judgment. In fact, their judgment is so poor, it's almost worse than the judgment of these women.
Now, I want to show you this because this is an autopsy. This is the report that I actually ended up getting today. And this is for Tanya Thomas. Now, Tanya Thomas went back to Mule Creek State Prison back in July of 2024 to visit her husband. Her family also learned she was killed.
What is going on?
Okay, you have people who are willing to roll the dice. They are so starved for intimacy, let's put it that way, that they are willing to roll the dice by going to a state prison and having a conjugal visit with someone who is convicted of killing 4 people. At what point do you just look in the mirror and you say to yourself, there's got to be a better way? What kind of losers are out there on those dating websites? What kind of bad dates must they have had where they continue to go back to the guy who was convicted of killing 4 people?
You know, there's a whole reality series about this now, right? It's called Love After Lockup.
Well, this isn't after lockup. This is during lockup.
Well, first they meet, and then when they get out, they get together, and shocker, it doesn't work out.
Surprise, surprise.
Usually doesn't work out like this, but 2 different women in 2 different conjugal visits with 2 different prisoners both got strangled to death during, I would imagine, the act.
Yeah, well, if you're a lady and you're thinking about going up there for, I don't know, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, you're going to have to go through a different checklist than you have to go through on most trips. Most trips, you have to make sure that someone's there to water your plants and take care of your pets and get your mail and those sorts of things. If you're going up to Mule Creek State Prison for a conjugal visit, you better make sure that your dental records are updated.
I want to show you some video of Tanya because I spoke with her family today who says they're very upset about the whole situation. Tanya, a mother, a loved person in the community, even worked in the Cal State system. She went up there to visit her husband, who also had been convicted of a violent crime, attempted murder of his girlfriend, who, according to court records, he shot her in the head, leaving her barely alive.
Holy cow.
And she couldn't see this coming.
I really feel bad if there's anybody listening that has very low self-esteem that can't seem to make it work with anybody out there, knowing that a murderer in prison is getting some.
Yeah, well, you need a conjugal visit with a convicted murderer like you need a bullet to the head.
Today, I had a chance to speak with the cousin of Tanya, who was very upset to learn this had happened to a second family. And when I read her a statement from CDCR the last time when I reached about Stephanie's case and about conjugal visits still being allowed to happen, I want to show you her response.
Family visits were not modified or paused as a result of this incident and continue to be available to eligible incarcerated individuals.
At what point do you change this policy? After the 3rd murder?
I don't even know what to say about this, because if you're dumb enough to go up there and roll the dice and you know what the risk is, it's like riding a motorcycle without a helmet. If you really want to do it, I guess I don't have a problem with it.
Is that the right thing to do?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Especially since her husband already had a history of violence and killed 4 people. You already had someone that got murdered.
Yeah, but then why did she go up there? Why was she still married to him?
Yeah, isn't that the key follow-up question?
You already had someone that got murdered in July. Why didn't you even care to stop it? They had the power to stop that. That's disgusting. That is disgusting. That's negligent. I can't even describe that.
Can you imagine if you work at a prison like this, the kind of people that come in for visitation?
Oh, listen, I did jury duty for a month. And when you do jury duty for a month, you see many of these fine people before they get sent to state prison because you share the same bathrooms and hallways and stairwells with them. And let me tell you, it's not hard to figure out who the defendants are. I don't know anyone in that building, but I could sit in that hallway and I can tell you who's killed 4 people and who hasn't.
Yeah, now, Pat, both Stephanie and Tanya were both strangled. Both of their deaths ruled a homicide. Both of them involved different men. I reached out to CDCR tonight to say, is this really the best practice in the prisons? They have not gotten back to me, Pat. I did talk to the family of...
I'm shocked they didn't get back to him.
Well, isn't the theory behind a conjugal visit that you want these guys to blow off some steam so they don't take it out on the other inmates and the guards?
Well, they did that.
So you know going into it that a conjugal visit is like feeding a mouse to an anaconda.
That's what's going on in Amador County, Johnny.
What a world. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Nicholas writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Wait, there's kitchens and apartments in prison now? F this, I'm moving back to California and becoming a criminal. Why not?